Then moving on to bifupion. Bifupion is the white sliced aconite, and so we start with the half-processed futsa, and then we peel it and we cut it longitudinally into slices about 4 millimeters thick. Please suspend judgment on the next slide because those are clearly not longitudinally cut slices. So we soak them and rinse them after we cut them, and then we start steaming them. Steamed thoroughly, and then dried in the sun to complete dryness. Mine turned yellow. And it will say you can half dry and then sulfur smoke to complete dryness, or you can half dry and then sun dry to complete dryness. I would advocate not sulfur smoking unless you're treating certain types of blood cancers. Bifupion identification. Bifupion identificatone and quality assessment. Bifupion is irregular longitudinal slices. The top is wide, the bottom is narrow. I wanted to read it accurately, I tried. The edges are slightly turned up. It should be 17 to 50 millimeters long, 9 to 30 millimeters wide, 2 to 5 millimeters thick. No outer skin. The sliced faces have a yellowish white color, and they're semi-transparent. So those are decent examples of bifupion. And then quality. So the outcome of the traditional processing, the aconitine molecules, they lose the acetyl group initially, which was one of the things hanging off the aconitine molecule that I pointed out 30 slides ago. We probably totally forgot. Anyway, big macromolecule has this thing hanging off. It loses that, and then it becomes a benzoyl aconine, which is a monoester diterpene. So we have diterpene diester alkaloids that we're turning into monoester diterpene alkaloids that then we're going to turn into non-ester diterpene alkaloids. It's essentially the process from aconitine to benzoyl aconine to benzoyl aconines that then convert to aconines. So diester diterpene, monoester diterpene to non-ester diterpene. And the aconines, the last non-ester diterpene alkaloid, have extremely low toxicity. So what we see in this work here is processing times of all these different steaming time in minutes. So out here at 60 minutes, they're saying that the concentration of mesaconitine and aconitine and hypoaconitine have all been reduced virtually to nothing after steaming for 60 minutes. So this would imply that the aconite that we received steamed is likely very low in toxicity. We can look at some of the figures actually, and it's hard to see, but the first thing that we talked about so far is Haitian peon. And Haitian peon is, so Shangfu peon is here, and when you say like, it has 50 milligrams per kilogram of aconitine, and then after processing, it goes all the way down to 0.12, which is 500, like a 500 time reduction in toxicity. Fairly significant. I mean, in a sense, that would increase the LD50 by 500 times, and initially it was 2 milligrams, and so now it goes up. So by processing, you can increase the amount that you can take internally almost a lot, safely 20 times, possibly much more. And then it's sort of consistent, bifupion shows a lower reduction in toxicity. I think a lot of this is due to the time issue, where it sounds quite odd because a lot of the aconitine itself is actually present in the peel, higher concentration in the peel. So you would think that taking the peel off would cause an even greater reduction in the amount of aconitine alkaloid, but it doesn't actually demonstrate that. When we look at it, I imagine that's the difference in steaming. If I have bifutsa and I remove the peel, I don't have to steam it as long to achieve transparency as I would with Haitian peon. I have to steam it to get it to turn brown. And that's actually what takes much longer. So I'm assuming that in these cases, the Haitian peon samples were steamed probably for 8 hours or 16 hours, and the bifupions are steamed for 2 to 4 hours. Some other research looking at, so this is high performance liquid chromatography. This is the medicinal material after processing, and so this is somebody that's looking at the medicinal material and saying, okay, so after you've got it and it's been steamed, how long do you need to cook it for to actually reduce all of the toxicity? And they're showing the reduction in the aconitine here over time as the boiling durations go up. And this is looking at a change from, where are we at here? We're 0, and then, it's hard to say. Let's look at the next slide. So at this last slide, this is actually boiling for 120 minutes. So after boiling for 120 minutes, aconitine alkaloids are non-detectable. Here at 90 minutes, there's still some aconitine, and here at 60 minutes, there's still some aconitine. So we see, and this is kind of how people are recommended to process aconite at school, essentially. When you're in school, they say you have to pre-boil your aconite for an hour before you take it. And this is after getting it steamed. So this thing has already been steamed for 8 hours and theoretically had its toxicity reduced somewhere between 20 and 500-fold. And then you're going to take it home and you're going to boil it for another hour, and you're going to boil off any of the toxic aconite alkaloids that were present even after the steaming. And you almost end up with something very benign. And so the process, it's essentially saying that after 30 minutes of processing the biflupion in this case, that there's very little toxicity. It's almost, the significant differences are very low. And this is kind of more in keeping with what I would say is the recommended boiling time, somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour, if you're getting good processed aconite. Another thing to look at, so the other question that sort of comes up is, does it even work anymore? If I just boil it till the cows come home and I boiled out all the aconite alkaloids, what does it do? Well, so this is an interesting and I guess sort of horrendous trial where they're inducing arthritis in mice and then making their little hind paws swell up, and then they're measuring the volume of the hind paw after treatment with aconite. And so here we have the model, and they're like inducing arthritis, and then it gets really swollen, and it gets really big, and then, it sucks to climb on the wheel. And so then they want some aconite. And they go to their little mouse Chinese pharmacist, and they take all the different types, the one that's been boiled for 120 minutes, the one that's been boiled for 60 minutes, the one that's been boiled for 30 minutes, and they all reduce the swelling to almost the same amount. And so that's promising. Typically, if you're hesitant to use FUTSA, the time to use FUTSA is someone with swelling and pain and due to cold. And and if you're still insecure about it, boil it for 2 hours, and you can have this type of confidence that it will still be functional. So what we see is that the safe dose of this FUTSA that's been boiled for 120 minutes is extremely high. They're saying 120 grams. 1,200 grams. Typically the lethal dose, theoretically, of processed FUTSA is 10 to 16 grams. It's rare that most people take processed FUTSA and just grind it up and take it without decocting it first. So even if you have processed FUTSA that's lethal at 10 to 16 grams, after you've boiled it for 30 minutes, you've reduced the toxicity of it by 20-fold. And then you pushed those numbers up to 200 to 320 or something like that. So there are a lot of traditions within Chinese medicine where people use massive doses of aconite. And it's not as insane as it seems on the surface if you realize high quality FUTSA and proper processing, after processing, proper boiling time for the actual doses that you're using, proper herbal combination using licorice and ginger, and proper diagnosis, giving it to people that don't have flaring Xiaoyang conditions or stuck, dry, hot Yangming conditions, problems with the liver, gallbladder, or problems with the hot, dry spleen and stomach. Yes. So in this case, they're saying 120. If you take this processed FUTSA and you boil it for 120 minutes, it's essentially completely detoxicated FUTSA. So we find that processed FUTSA lowers the amounts of the aconitines, and so it can be used internally. The dosage of processed FUTSA can be increased greatly to create other therapeutic benefits, because we have then We can use a higher dose, and we can manifest the benefits of constituents such as dimethylcochlorine, chlorine chlorides, salsolinol, and uracil. And these have some of the kind of standard aconite effects when it's used internally to fight arrhythmia or to treat hypertension or to strengthen cardiac functioning. All right, that's all I got on aconite. Are there any questions on aconite? Yes?
The dosage, so you said 1,200 grams for humans. Does that mean that's your diet at 12? Or
I refuse to repeat any of what I've said on any of those numbers because I would hate to be held accountable for any of it. So that's what it says. This is somebody else's research. Yeah, I mean, that goes through that whole process, right? Like initially you'll have, yeah, that's what they found. They were doing a mice study and they extrapolated grams to kilogram from mice to humans. And the mice was probably, I don't know how much less a mouse weighs than a human. 1 pound or something.
Yeah, just the 2 bullet points I want to show the difference between the first and the second.
Right, so that's essentially what they're saying is that, say we take the stuff in this bag. This is what they're saying is toxic at 10 to 16 grams. And if you look on the bag that Springwind sends us in, that's essentially what it'll say on the bag. It has like a little skull and crossbones, and it says like, don't boil for an hour and don't use more than 6 grams. So this is a conventional wisdom essentially. And I think that's more a reflection of like a worst case scenario, but when you're talking about toxicity and people dying, it's good to respect worst case scenarios. And so that's why it's like not that wise to talk about these really high numbers, but just to kind of understand the principle where they're saying that, you know, boiling it for 120 hours is reducing the toxicity like more than 200 times, or well, not in this case, not 200 times, but 120 times. And that's what we see looking at these numbers, you know. I mean, but seriously, boiling for 2 hours, you know what I mean? It's not like bring it to a boil and then simmer it for 2 hours. It's like boil it for 2 hours. I mean, it's similar. Just keep it like right at a boiling point.